The sun was just rising over the harbor when the silence broke, not from gulls or lapping waves, but from the low, thunderous hum of 4 Navy warships anchoring just beyond the marina. Moments later, a rib boat tore across the water toward the dock where an old veteran stood alone beside the wreckage of his crushed fishing boat. No orders, no press, just uniformed sailors disembarking in formation without saying a single word. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The docks always smelled like brine and engine oil, but to Walter Hayes, that was the perfume of freedom. At 72, his back stiffened before his knees did, but he still moved with a kind of dignity that only came from decades of standing at attention before the flag. He didn't walk, he marched, even in sneakers. Each morning began the same way. At 4:50 a.m. sharp, a digital beep echoed through the modest clapboard home he'd never bothered to renovate since his wife passed. He didn't need open floor plans or granite countertops, just his battered recliner, a wall of framed service medals, and a calendar marked with naval anniversaries in blue ink. He brewed a single mug of black coffee, strong enough to peel paint, and stared out the window at Liberty bobbing in her slip. She was more than a boat. She was memory preserved in oak and fiberglass. Walter had named her after the ship that carried him through the worst typhoon he'd ever seen, and after the woman who carried him through 2 deployments and a cancer scare. Eliza had died 6 years ago. Liberty was all that remained. By 5:15, Walter was down at the marina, his navy ball cap low over weathered eyes that didn't miss a single detail. His gait was slow, deliberate. His right hand, with knuckles scarred from engine room burns and bar brawls long past, gripped the bait bucket. Locals knew better than to offer help, not because he was unfriendly, but because Walter carried his pride like a medal. He needed to do it himself. The moment he couldn't would be the day he stopped getting up at all. Once aboard Liberty, he checked the lines, ran his fingers along the railing, and muttered to her like she was flesh and blood. The old boat creaked in response, their quiet ritual. The engine growled awake, and Walter maneuvered out of the slip with the precision of a man who once docked nuclear submarines in foreign ports. He didn't fish to sell. He rarely even kept what he caught. Some days he barely put a line in the water. It wasn't about the catch. It was the stillness, the salt air, the discipline of routine. It was a form of remembrance. Out there, he wasn't an old man waiting for time to take him. He was still Chief Hayes, out on patrol, holding the line between order and chaos, and no one could take that from him. Not yet. The sun hung low, casting gold across the harbor, catching every ripple like molten foil. It was the kind of Friday afternoon that sold postcards and Airbnb listings, kayaks slicing quietly through blue, seagulls crying over fish scraps, and the sound of laughter echoing off weathered docks. Rockport Marina was buzzing, full of wide-brimmed hats and bronzed arms lifting cocktails instead of nets. The smell of sunscreen masked the scent of salt and diesel. To tourists, it was paradise. To Walter Hayes, it was noise without meaning. Then came the Adonis. She didn't ease into the harbor. She announced herself. Polished to a mirror shine, she looked like she'd been carved out of a billionaire's dream and dipped in chrome. Twin engines roared like thunder beneath a playlist designed to offend every local. Synthetic bass lines, auto-tuned shrieks, and the occasional whoop from onboard partygoers tossing champagne into the wind like confetti. At the helm, detached from reality, stood Blake Carmichael. Designer sunglasses shielded eyes that hadn't known a hard day's work. His smile, not cruel, just oblivious, was the smile of a man who'd never had to read a rule book because money always rewrote it for him. In his world, speed was flair, noise was power, and respect was optional. Walter saw the yacht before it saw him. Liberty floated quietly in her slip, tied with practiced knots, as Walter leaned over to secure a lure box. He barely looked up, until the water surged. The bow wake hit fast and without warning, a sudden slap against the hull, followed by the unmistakable grind of wood against propeller steel. The impact wasn't cinematic. It was brutal and clumsy. Liberty twisted sideways, the stern lifted violently, and then, like a breath knocked from a chest, she folded inward and rolled. The sound was sickening, splintering timber, snapping line, water rushing in through every seam. Walter stumbled, one leg soaked, his cap flying. His fingers scraped against rusted metal as he caught the dock railing with seconds to spare. The yacht never stopped. The music didn't falter. No one looked back. Blake Carmichael sipped something out of crystal glassware, pointed at a girl on a jet ski, and laughed. The crewman who shouted too late gave a half-turn, shrugged, and returned to his post. Walter pulled himself upright, trembling not from fear, but rage. His boat wasn't just crushed. She was dismissed. And that, more than anything, was the wound that wouldn't heal. By dusk, the marina had gone quiet. Its daytime clamor faded into the low hum of halyards, tapping masts, and distant car radios, bleeding country tunes into the salt air. Where parasails had danced earlier, only gulls now circled, keening over the lull. The tourists had retreated to their rentals. Locals avoided the dock like a funeral home. Everyone had seen what happened. No one wanted to be part of the aftermath. Walter sat alone at the edge of the planks, legs hanging limp over the side, one hand gripping the wood as if to keep from drifting into some deeper void. The ruined frame of Liberty floated a few feet away, tethered like a corpse waiting to be claimed. Her starboard hull was peeled back, split open like a ribcage. Foam stuffing and tackle boxes bobbed among the oil-slick swirls. Her name, once painted with Eliza's favorite navy blue brush, was now smudged and water-streaked, the lettering bent across fractured fiberglass. A laminated apology from the marina had been left taped to his front door. The general manager never came in person. And then there was the envelope, thick, official, resting heavy in Walter's palm earlier that afternoon, like a bribe wrapped in politeness. Inside, a letter of regret from Carmichael's attorneys and a check for $8,000. For repairs and emotional inconvenience, it read. In exchange, silence. Sign here. Do not discuss the incident. Do not sue. Walter had burned it. Not the check. The letter. The check still sat on his kitchen counter under an unopened can of beans. He didn't need the money. He needed what no man could buy. Dignity. At 8:42 p.m., the dock creaked beside him. A quiet shuffle of sneakers. "Hey, Chief," came a voice, soft, unsure. It was Joey Morales, 15, local, wiry, with a mop of unruly curls and a heart that didn't yet know how to be afraid of the world. Joey had helped Walter every summer for the past 3 years, scrubbing decks, hauling ice, listening to stories about the Pacific and the smell of diesel in storm weather. Walter never called him Kid, always Morales, like he was part of the crew. Joey said nothing more. Just stood for a moment, then pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. Walter, silhouetted against the last red of twilight, with Liberty's broken ribs behind him. He typed with his thumbs, head low. By 9:10, the photo had 300 shares. By midnight, it had 40,000. And by morning, the internet would know what Blake Carmichael had done and what he tried to pay off. The cold crept in overnight, curling under Walter's collar like a warning. He hadn't moved from the dock, not when the wind picked up, not when the moon passed overhead like a silent sentry. His hands rested motionless on his knees, fingers locked, back straight, not from comfort, but from discipline honed across decades of service. The water before him had stilled to ink. The ruins of Liberty drifted faintly against the dock pilings, casting broken shadows that shifted like memories he'd tried not to touch. His phone buzzed once in his jacket pocket. He didn't check it. Behind him, the town slept. Ahead, the ocean waited. Then, just past 5 a.m., it began. A low, resonant hum. Deep, mechanical, unmistakable. Not pleasure craft. Not trawlers. Engines with teeth. Walter straightened, his ears snapping alert like a tuning fork struck clean. He squinted toward the horizon, eyes searching the edge of the fog line, where the harbor bled into open sea. Gray shapes materialized, first as ghosts, then as steel. 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers flanked a Ticonderoga cruiser. Between them, a smaller Perry-class frigate cut the water like a dagger. No weapons visible, no sirens, just silence and presence. They held formation just beyond the boundary line of the marina's private water jurisdiction, a line Carmichael's yacht had never bothered to respect. Walter rose slowly, boots creaking against damp boards, hand instinctively brushing against the ribbon bar still pinned beneath his jacket lining. For a moment, he thought maybe he was hallucinating, some final act of grief and fatigue. Then a rib boat dropped into the water from one of the destroyers with the hydraulic elegance only sailors understood. Twin engines roared, the rigid hull craft peeled away from the mothership, slicing across the glassy water toward him with the accuracy of a torpedo, but human, intentional. On board were 6 figures, standing in practiced silence, white spray framing their silhouettes. As the boat approached, Walter recognized the insignia on the nearest sailor's jacket, Chief Boatswain's Mate. A rank he hadn't worn in over 30 years, but one that still meant something in this language of quiet honor. The rib eased into the slip beside him. No one shouted. No one filmed. One sailor stepped forward, nodded once, and offered Walter a steady hand. "Permission to come alongside, Master Chief," the sailor said. Walter didn't speak. He just saluted. By mid-morning, the air at Rockport Marina had changed. Not in temperature or scent, but in weight, as if history itself had dropped anchor offshore. Uniformed sailors moved with calm precision, their boots echoing against the wooden docks like a slow, steady drumline. They said nothing. No chants, no slogans, no raised fists. Their presence alone declared everything that needed to be said. They came in pairs, in clusters, in silence. From Norfolk, Annapolis, Portsmouth, and Boston. Active duty Navy officers in their dress blues. Retired chiefs in faded caps and windbreakers bearing faded patches from long decommissioned ships. Even merchant marines showed up, holding weathered photos of lost brothers. Some had canes, a few leaned on each other. All stood like iron. Next to the sunken hull of Liberty, a plywood board had been erected against the dock railing. Within hours, it was covered. Not with graffiti, but with medals, letters, old deployment photos, and handwritten notes clipped beneath laminated American flags. USS Hancock, 1972, one read. "Thank you, Chief Hayes," from one sailor to another. Another. "You stood watch, we stand now." Kids wandered through the growing crowd with their parents. Most didn't speak. One little girl saluted every veteran she passed. No one corrected her form. Walter watched from the edge of the gathering like a man unaccustomed to being seen. He wasn't crying. Not exactly. But something behind his stern expression had given way. His fingers twitched as if trying to salute back, but he couldn't lift his arm. Not from age, but from sheer emotional gravity. The man beside him broke the silence. "She was a good-looking boat," he said quietly. Walter turned. The speaker wore a leather flight jacket with the name Lieutenant Commander Sarah McNeil embroidered in gold over the left breast. Her eyes didn't waver. "I never forgot what you taught me," she said. "About presence, about silence." Walter nodded. That was all. That was enough. Then came the sound of tires screeching, followed by the arrival of the Adonis's owner. Blake Carmichael stepped out of a matte black SUV, flanked by 2 assistants in polos and Bluetooth headsets. His sunglasses were down, but his voice was raised. "You can't park battleships in a private marina. This is a PR stunt. It's intimidation, and it's illegal." A Navy press officer, surrounded by a dozen flags fluttering in the breeze, stepped forward calmly. His uniform was crisp. His tone was cooler than the Atlantic. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. "We're not here for you." And with that, Carmichael vanished into the crowd like a shadow under full sun. The crane arrived just after sunset. Its steel arm rose above the harbor like a sentinel, backlit by the soft hues of a dying sky. Floodlights cast sharp beams over the water, slicing through the dusk like spotlights on a stage. And at center stage, Liberty, broken but unbowed, suspended mid-air in a cradle of straps and steel. Her hull dripped in silence, the last of the harbor sliding off her with an almost reverent slowness. Sailors and civilians alike stood in rows to watch, hats in hand, phones mostly tucked away. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a ceremony. Navy engineers in coveralls moved methodically, inspecting the damage, whispering to each other in the shorthand of professionals. They didn't ask permission to help. They'd already decided. Walter tried to protest once, but they shut him down with quiet deference. "We take care of our own," one had said. That was the end of that. Across the dock, Liberty's skeleton was laid onto padded beams. A shipwright named Bill Conway, a man with salt and pepper stubble and a shop just down the coast, stepped forward and ran a calloused hand over the cracked ribs. "We can bring her back," he said softly, "but maybe she's already done her last duty." Walter didn't answer. Not then. By the next morning, the veteran-run non-profit Deckhands for Honor had launched a fundraiser. The goal was modest, $10,000 to cover repairs. By lunchtime, it hit $40,000. By midnight, it crossed $100K. Within 48 hours, $220,000 and climbing. The comments flooded in like high tide. "For my father, who served with Chief Hayes in Nam. Because this is what brotherhood looks like. Let the Navy teach respect the way it used to be taught." Meanwhile, Blake Carmichael's face appeared in a sterile, overly lit apology video. He read off a teleprompter. His tone was wooden, his suit too sharp. "I deeply regret," he began, but the clip was flooded with dislikes, mocking stitches, and reaction videos comparing it to bad reality TV confessionals. One veteran's duet summed up the mood perfectly. "You didn't regret it. You regretted getting seen." But Walter never wasted breath on bitterness. A week later, Eliza's honor was christened at Pier 7, hull glistening under a fresh coat of navy blue. Bigger, sturdier, modernized, but still bearing the soul of a sailor's promise. Her first voyage wasn't solo. Joey was at the ropes. Sarah McNeil adjusted the nav. 3 young recruits listened as Walter told them how to read wind, not by instruments, but by instinct. At the bow, Walter stood tall, his shadow long against the open sea. "Still got purpose," he whispered. "Still got wind." And the harbor for once stood perfectly still, like it was listening,